title of my presentation is Simple Solutions for Maximal Gains, okay? And what we're really going to try to do today is create a simplified movement lens, okay? We're going to learn how to utilize breathing to shape the body and optimize movements. And we're going to learn just a few simple active tests that can be quickly and easily utilized in the gym and clinical setting. And we'll use these to help guide our exercise selections. So really, I had a cool little slide. It's really awesome right here, but I've already introduced myself. I've worked with a lot of people. I've been a PT and a performance coach for about 15 years now. Performance coach for about almost 20, so. But I've worked with people from high school to lower than that to professional, Olympics, senior Olympics, and so forth, right? But with all that being said, I'm just a dude trying to figure out how the body works. That's all I am. And I'm going to try to hopefully do my best to show that to you today. So the human body is very complex, but not very complicated. And I think we overly complicate things with a lot of our assessments and things like that we learn in school, right? Which is great. We want to learn as much as we can in detail. But in the clinical setting, in the gym setting, in real life, it's not a complicated matter. And then we're going to talk about that. So the basics of human movement. All right, so in the hopes of learning about ourselves, somewhere around the 3rd century BC, we kind of started dissecting the deceased, right? So I'm sure we did this in a less formal manner before then. But if you picture them kind of looking at the hardened skeletons, the newly dead people, what they're going to see is a apparently endless array of pulleys and levers, right? So they dissect it down, they see all the tendons, they see the muscles, they see how it pulls the arm around. The problem is we usually compare things to things that we know. So they would have compared this to, say, getting water out of the well, right? So the pulley and lever system is still taught like this today, from the most basic to the highest anatomical studies, right? But I want to introduce kind of a newer picture of how we move. So if I bring this up, we see this right here. Just a simple single cell organism. How does it move? It moves by compressing and expanding its body to move through space, right? So it's basically just a bag of water with some stuff in it. And that is all it is. And that's how it moves, though. It compresses and expands its body. Humans are really no different. We are mostly just a bag of water and some stuff in it. Mostly collagen and a few things like that, but that's all we are. So if this is true, then we must behave based on how the physical rules of water react to things around it, like gravity and the forces inside and outside of our bodies. So next, I want to cue the wacky waving inflatable tube man. I know we've all seen this. There's one on 98 right down by my house in Gulf Breeze. Even though maybe a lot of people haven't been over that way in a while. I don't really know how that works. I think we have more in common with this guy than we do with levers and pulleys, right? The tube man moves against gravity due to expansion, right? So this expansion for him is provided by its air pump. We do the same thing every time we breathe in. This is our primary strategy of support. It's the most energy efficient way to support our body, right? So we want to be able to use this in the most energy efficient way to support our bodies against gravity and other forces imposed upon us, right? So as the volume of air enters our body and expands our thorax, the whole body experiences fluid shifts and pressure changes that alter our physical shape against gravity. Now, everybody just take as deep a breath as possible. So as we bring that air in, do you feel yourself expanding, right? We feel our body getting bigger. Well, congratulations. You're now a cousin of the wacky waving inflatable tube man. And that's really all it is. We're bringing air in, we're getting taller. Now, when you shut off that fan on the tube man, what happens? Goes down, right? So he still has a little air left inside, and that's just not enough for him to expand and lift himself up though, right? So if only he had something like, maybe muscles that squeeze the remaining air, right? He'd stay upright. So now shut off your fan, right? Exhale out all your air. What happens? We collapse down, right? Our thorax collapses down when we exhale. We lose some height. But the problem is, or the difference is between us and the tube man, is we don't just fall down. We have muscles to support ourselves, right? And so that's our secondary strategy, our muscles. The only problem with that is that takes a lot of energy, right? Now, if our muscles change shape, pay attention to the shape of the muscle, right? When you flex your bicep, you squeeze, one side expands, one side expands, one side compresses, right? That's how it moves. It changes shape. The other muscles of your body do this every time you take a breath out, right? And that way we don't collapse under the load of gravity. So this is our second strategy. It takes a little bit more energy, but we don't want to use this all the time, right? So just think about the last time you pulled a heavy deadlift, you put a barbell on your shoulders. What's the first thing you do before you move it? We're squeezing everything we can, right? Because we don't want that weight to crush us, right? So this is obviously just an amplification of that strategy, but it's the same thing. We want to be able to support our body, right? So to simplify it, there's really only expansion and compression. It's only two strategies of movement we have to move against gravity and the other forces imposed on us, right? So you can either expand or compress the fluid content of your body to maintain shape, to acquire positions, and to move, right? Now, if you can coordinate those compressive strategies with the expansive strategies to promote this fluid shift, then we're going to be able to move in a variety of ways and pretty easily. Cue Barry Sanders. I'm sure most of us have seen Barry Sanders, at least one Barry Sanders clip running on ESPN. Probably one of the best elusive running backs out there, right? Now, our ability to manipulate shape allows us to walk, run, jump, throw, and do really magical things just like Barry Sanders. Well, most of us can't do it like Barry Sanders, but it's something similar, right? And so there's both good and bad to this. So here's the problem. We can either raise our performance in a very specific way if we can gather the compression portion really well, right? Or if we go too far in that direction, then it can be a source of limitation that imposes too much load on the system and can perpetuate really almost unrecoverable changes, right? And so if we look at the body as just two things, expansion and compression, then we can also look at it as external rotation and internal rotation. That moves us, external and internal moves us in just one plane. There's only one plane. There's the transverse plane. I know we've all been taught sagittal, frontal, transverse. Well, in reality, even a knee joint has transverse motions. That's how it gets that sagittal motion back and forth, right? And so as we move in and out, our scapula and our pelvis move into external, internal rotation in order for us to achieve all our motions, right? Now, this isn't just we're an external and we're an internal. There's a spectrum. We're either biased one way or the other, but we're never just in internal rotation. So if I say my arm goes down, right? Most everybody would probably say I'm in internal rotation. I am biased towards internal rotation, but there's still a portion of this that is external rotation. So you have to think of it as a spectrum, a long spectrum. We're never just in one portion of this, right? Now, if we look at external rotation as being the expansive qualities and internal rotation being the compressive qualities, then we also have to look at it as expansion being force absorption and compression being force production. Now, we always want a good amount of force production when we're doing some type of athletic sport, but we need a good quality of force absorption as well, right? So if we go too far into one side of things, then we can't absorb force, and then therefore we're going to start having some injuries, right? Now our performance may be great, but we may be a little more prone to injury. Now if we can't absorb that force on the other end, or we absorb too much force, then performance may likely go down because our force production isn't going to be there, right? So we need to vary that depending on what you're looking at, right? And I'll show you as we go through the assessments how that's going to come into play. Now, the active assessments we're going to go through, we're going to look at breathing, we're going to look at infrasternal angle, which is the angle just at the lower part of the rib cage. For the lower half, we're going to look at a simple toe touch, a deep squat, and then for the upper half, we're going to look at shoulder extension and to extent internal rotation, and then shoulder flexion, overhead reach. And we're going to show you how that corresponds with different parts of the thorax and the pelvis, and how we can solve that to get that motion back as needed. Now, why does breathing and airflow matter? Right? I know everybody talks about, oh, you know, breathing this, breathing that, that's the new thing. Well, think of it as this. Most of us think about breathing as this. When we take air in, we think the air goes into our chest, right? Because that's where we feel it the most, right? Now, as we breathe in reality, our entire body moves through a repetitive cycle. We don't really feel this because it's very subtle, and we do it about 22,000 times a day. So it's something that we don't really look at a lot, because if we did, we'd just go insane, right? I mean, every time we take a breath, our body's moving, right? So, but what happens is as we move in, breathe air in, our pelvis moves, which in turn moves our hips, and our thorax moves, which moves our scapula and our humerus and our neck and so forth, right? So if for some reason this little gentle cycle of movement was disrupted or restricted, then so is the movement at our shoulders and our hips and our neck, right? And also we got to think about the brain. The brain's an air hog. At only like 2% of our body weight, it takes in about 20% of the oxygen that we take in, right? So it's going to induce any strategy necessary to get air, right? It loves oxygen because without that, we're screwed, right? So it'll increase muscle tension, which is generally what you'll feel in the neck or the back of the body, right? It'll twist your body to one side or the other to try to get air in. It'll make you as uncomfortable as possible because it does not care, right? It will limit your movement. It will be the stop gap. It'll be your brakes. It'll inhibit your movement to do whatever it can to get the air in, right? So it won't let you move into positions or postures where it can't get enough air. At least for not very long, right? Or you'll end up holding your breath, right? So, say I'll get this ball real quick and I'll show you just a simple example. So, if I put a ball under one arm, right? Our rib cage is supposed to expand circumferentially all the way around. If one side has too much volume in it, what's going to happen? Say this is the volume of air. If I can't exhale that out, and I try to side bend, I'm going to be limited. But if I can exhale that out and compress one side and expand the other, I'm going to have more motion, right? So that's just an amplified picture of that. But that's really what it is at our rib cage. If we're too inhaled in one area and we can't get that air out and we can't compress, that's all that is. And that's why the breathing patterns and trying to get that variability of motion is so important. So I like to always go back to this is before we start driving hard mobility drills like the open buck or the foam roll and extending back and a lot of the rotational twists. Now don't get me wrong, a lot of people will do well with this and they'll probably feel good, but how many times have you done that with somebody and then do it the next day and then the next day and the next day and they're still stiff and it's not really coming back, right? So that's why I think we need to look a little deeper into something like this, and a lot of times it's just as simple as this. Now, the first test I want to go through is the infrasternal angle. So it's hard to see right here, but what I'll do is the infrasternal angle, you have your sternum that goes down into your xiphoid process right here. And then you have your ribs right down here. This is your infrasternal ribs, your kind of your floating ribs at the bottom, right? So this right here is just a representation of somebody's compensation to get air into the body. So what we want to test is whether or not it is a wide or a narrow infrasternal angle, or if it's a dynamic infrasternal angle, which is very rare, but generally people are going to be wide archetypes or narrow archetypes, right? Now, why is this showing up down low? Because these ribs are the most pliable in the entire body, right? So that's just where it comes out, and it's the easiest to test, right? So if we're looking at it, a wide ISA, right here, is anything that's about 100 degrees or more as far as the angle. And then a narrow is something that's 100 degrees or less. I'm trying to say 90 degrees or less. Now, you don't have to get a goniometer out and look at it. You can generally just look at them and go narrow, wide. You can generally look at the body type, and I'll show you that here in a minute, is whether or not they're going to be wide or narrow, right? So let's see. Let's pick somebody who can squat really heavy. Anybody? All right, who feels like very stiff? All right, let's look at you. You want to volunteer? Yeah. All right, come on up here. Now, if everybody wants to look too, I'm going to show you how to measure the ISA. Very simple. All right, so lay on your back for me, pretty please. Now, number one, first rule. No touching without permission. This is going to keep you from getting into a lot of trouble, okay? So always want to go tell them you're going to touch their rib cage while you're doing it and so forth, right? Right. You mind if I get on your rib cage? All right, so I'm going to measure your infrasternal angle, okay? And so what you want to do is you come in from down low and you palpate until you get right around that xiphoid process, right? You'll feel the rib cage right down low like this. And we get there, and she's got an angle about like this, right? And so I would probably say that's a pretty wide infrasternal angle. Pretty easy to see, okay? Now, what you'll see a lot of times with a wide infrasternal angle is they're generally going to lack external rotation and flexion as their primary compensation, but you'll see them lacking other things as secondary compensations, right? And so I generally look at the internal rotation a lot of times. I'll look at their flexion and just kind of get a gross measurement of where they're at, right? And reason I'm going to do this is I'm going to do a little trick with her and see how this works. We're lacking a lot of external, right? So that would be kind of one of our primary compensations from that ISA being really wide, right? So let's look at this. Let's see if this works. All right, so if we look at it, she's pretty stiff into internal rotation, right? All right, so we're going to do the magic. You ready? Mm-hmm. All right, you mind if I touch your face?
Sure.
All right, so. All right, now just relax. How's that? That was fun, right? All right, now, here's the fun part. Arch your back up real big. There you go. All right, take real deep breaths, real fast, hyperventilate. Breathe in and out, faster, 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 faster. There you go. And, oh, look at that. And I took it away because her range of motion is all mine. Now I could charge her like $50, $100. I could give it back to her, but I'm not going to right now. All right, now stay there. Let me show you this other one. This was Now, we think that might be happening because of the rooting reflex, which is a deep-seated like reflex from birth, right? But we also think it may be because of the trigeminal nerve sensation coming through there. It causes them to relax when we rub the face, right? Now, spread your fingers apart. Let's put that there. I'm going to let you look at my really nice pen, which needs a new ink canister, by the way. All right, so you just watch that, okay? Just look at it. See the cool little silver on it. It's a nice little pink pearl. Looks nice, right? I really like it. I think it's a really nice pen. It writes tremendously. Pretty cool, huh? Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to take that pen back because I don't want you taking it anywhere. All right, now just relax. All right, there we go. Give it back to her. I'm going to let you keep it right now, though, okay? So that is basically just showing you that all the stretching and all this other stuff, the sleeper stretches, those are all well and good, but a lot of times it's not really going to do the trick, right? We can just jam the joint away all you want. And I probably would have done that with her, 15 years ago. But we've kind of learned over time that it's not necessarily just structural issues causing us to be tight. A lot of times it's just tension and the brain kind of putting that stop sign on us, putting the brakes on so we slow down, right? All right, so you mind if I do you a cool trick? Sure. All right, so let's just see. We could do it, let's do it on the table. Let's stand up so I can move the table back a little bit. This should work, we'll see. So let's lay down on your either side. Doesn't matter, let's just have your back facing here. There you go. So we're just gonna bend the knees, get comfortable right there. Slide back a little bit. There you go. All right. Ugh. How's that right there? You good? All right. Now, I'm going to use these sandbags to just squish the hell out of her thorax and pelvis. How's that right there? You good? Right. So all I want you to do here is just hang out. I want you to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. When you breathe in, I want you to feel that air going way back in here into like the back of the hips. Okay? I want to feel the ribs getting real big. Cool? All right, so you hang out there for a little bit. So, this is just one measurement. So this isn't going to just change everything, but this is a great measurement to guide your exercise selection. Now, if you want to see a physical representation of what a wide is versus a narrow, we're going to look here and here. So this is the thorax, cut off right through here, okay? And this is we're looking down from the top. So if you look at a wide is basically squish front to back, okay? And then a narrow, squish side to side. Now, the ideal for movement variability is to make it look like a ball, okay? Nice round circle, balls roll really well. If you try to roll wide, we're going to get a little clunk, 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 and it's not going to go very far, right? Now, Eddie Hall. I think most people have probably seen Eddie Hall. He's probably one of the strongest guys out there right now. So Eddie Hall is for sure a wide ISA. Never put my hands on him, but I can guarantee he's a wide ISA. Wide ISA people are very compressed, but they can move a lot of weight. They can produce force like crazy. But they're generally lacking flexion, abduction, external rotation. I'm sure he can not get up there that high. He could probably do better than most, but they also have increased lumbar lordosis, so it shifts them forward, and they have their sacrum right back here. Your tailbone is a little more biased towards nutation. So it is shifting everything forward, right? They're getting there. That's generally why when you see a wide ISA, they're going to have almost like a beer belly, They're going to have that big beer belly, right? And that's because everything's shifted forward. They're nice and wide through here. Their abs are a little bit underactive. The treatment strategy for them is going to be a lot of exhalation and compression through the front side and then expansion on the back, because we basically want to get rid of that squish front to back and squish them. So they like to, a lot of them is like side lying. It works really well for them because you're using gravity to push it down from the sides, right? Super easy. Now narrows are basically just the inverse of them. So this is Paula Radcliffe. She's a world record, well, was a world record holder, so she got beat in the marathon, right? She is the exact opposite. They're generally very good at absorbing force over time. They're lacking a lot of extension, adduction, internal rotation. They have a decreased lumbar lordosis, and their sacrum likes to tilt back underneath them, right? Treatment strategies for them are to get their abs to almost turn off a little bit more, get a little more expansion through the front side, and actually compress them a little bit more, because we want to lean them more towards the force production side, right? So it's just somewhere along that spectrum of where we want to be. How you doing over there? You good? All right. Now, the number one goal with all of this is to get stacked, right? And by stacked, I mean we have our thoracic and our pelvic diaphragms. Now, what we want to happen there is the majority of people are generally going to have an open kind of scissor position here. We want them to all be parallel to each other, or at least have that ability to open and close, right? We want that movement variability, but if we can get them stacked, then we're probably going to give them the most chance to have motion all over through their shoulders and their hips and their ankles and so forth, right? Now, I think we've probably let you sit there for a little too long, right? So we'll take that off, and we'll take that off. All right, now turn on your back for me, pretty please. How was that? You good? All right. So now, just relax. There we go. How's that feel? Feel pretty good? So that just kind of drops on down there. I don't even have to do anything right there, right? I mean, she started off right here. And all we did was make a small little shape in her pelvis. Now, this is just a transient change. How's that feel now, huh? Oh, there we go. A little better right there, right? Cool. And so I would say, let somebody get some sandbags, let somebody lay there for like 5 minutes and breathe as a warm-up. That's going to do you way better than getting the foam roller, getting on a bike, doing anything like that, because now we've gained more motion. Now we can just go in there and get after it now, right? So we've given them a little bit more ability to move and just be able to train, right? All right, cool. Hop on up. Now, test number 2, toe touch, okay? Now, what we're looking for with a toe touch is to be able to go all the way down, touch the toes with a nice uniform curve through the spine, right? That's all it is. So we're looking for them to be able to get lower cervical flexion, upper cervical extension. Then as you go down, about 45 degrees, you've got to expand right along your thorax all through here, right? So it has to open up. So down there, once you get down to about the knee level, give or take, the sacrum has to counter-nutate, because that's got to allow for us to gain a little bit more depth and shift back. And then this last little bit, as our pelvis is almost horizontal like this now, the sacrum has to nutate. And that's going to give us this last little bit, because without that nutation, then the hips can't get their flexion. Now this is going to be a lot of people that have pain with deadlifting, and they'll get down here. It's because that sacrum can't either counter-nutate or nutate back and forth, right? And so we're stuck in one position more than the other. And so that's why they feel better either with like a trap bar deadlift, or an elevated deadlift, or a kettlebell or something like that, right? Because they don't have to capture that last little bit of motion. So same thing with the breathing. What can limit it is anterior constraints. So say I have a big Swiss ball and I try to go down and touch my toes. not going to go very far. Not going to be able to compress the front side, right? And in the inverse part of that is we need to be able to expand the backside, right? Especially down into the pelvis, that posterior inferior portion of the pelvis to get that last little bit of depth. A lot of times we're too compressed in that area. Now you also see the people that can go all the way down, this isn't me, but can go down and palm the floor. Well, that's also not something we want to see, even though it's great mobility. Generally, you'll see them and they'll have a nice flat back, right? So all they're doing is just utilizing those hamstrings like crazy to stretch them out and get as much motion out of those as they can. But we want them to actually draw them back. So a lot of times getting more hamstrings and abs and opening up that rib cage is going to actually help them a little bit more. You see that in gymnasts a lot of times. They'll have that straight leg raise that's just crazy. But then if you actually check their hip flexion, it's probably like, 70, 80 degrees, right? That's because they're just way up there. The hamstrings are allowed to lengthen out, right? Now, I like to think of the toe touch in my head like a slinky. So if you just look at a slinky, it does the same thing as the toe touch, compressing on one side, expanding on the other. It's just an easy way to figure that out, right? Now, let's see, who wants to touch their toes? JL, come on. Actually, now Faith, let's stick with you. Come on over here. Let's touch your toes real quick. I'm gonna just check this out. All right, so just have your feet together. Try to keep your knees straight. And just nice and easy, let's go down and touch your toes. Not bad. But what you'll see is this. So turn this way. Okay. All right. Now go down and touch your toes. You'll see flat areas. So she's a little flat up here. She's a little flat right through here, right? So we want that to actually be a nice uniform curve all the way. So even though she can touch her toes, she's getting most of her motion through probably this mid-thoracic area, right? So that's where she's just compensating right through there, right? So that's where we want to look at when we look at just touching our toes and being able to assess that, right? Now you can also assess it like this with our feet apart, right? Now if you don't mind, face this way. We'll take a step back. There you go. Have your feet about shoulder width apart. Take your right hand over your left. Now I want you to go down, keep your knees straight, touch your left toes. Good. Now, can you see how her body is like this? It doesn't go straight down. So go down again. A lot of times they'll shift off of that side because they can't expand on the back side straight back. So they shift off of it so they don't have to have that expansion. So they're very compressed down low. Now switch hands and switch feet. Does everybody kind of see that? And so ideally, even with them going down here, you want them to go straight back. You don't want them to shift off of it one side versus the other, right? So that's a way you can see if they're having some hip pinching or something like that with the squat or the deadlift, to kind of draw that out a little bit better. Cool, thanks. Yeah. Now I'll send everybody the PowerPoint if y'all want it, but really easiest ways to look at this is, say, with a wide ISA, things like the gym exercises are great because like you got the dumbbell pullover. Those are great because we're trying to get that compression up front, right? Things like a cable chop or a pull down, all that compression, right? With a narrow ISA, we actually want more of a neutral row and reach right through here because we don't want to get too far down, right? So we don't want to compress that even further. We want to get that to actually open up, usually in the backside. And then things like goblet squats, Zercher, just about anything is going to be fantastic. Carry variations are going to be very good. And then you can also toe touch modifications. So with a wide ISA, you actually want to elevate the heels. And with a narrow ISA, we want to elevate the toes. Because this is going to help us be able to counter nutate a lot better. This is going to help us nutate a little bit better. So that's just changing the shape of the pelvis and the position and where it goes, right? Now, squat. I actually want to show this video. This is an awesome video. I'm pretty sure this chick does CrossFit, but This is a really cool squat with her going up and down with this dude. That's super impressive. But I really wanted you to see it too because it shows you the phases of the squat as she goes down, which is, I'll explain, it's pretty neat. So what is the squat showing us, right? Squat's basically showing us, can we change levels in a vertical plane? Can we go up and down without hinging it, just like we do our toe touch and just like we do our deadlift, right? So these people that hinge their squat are generally going to be way more compressed, right? So we don't want to hinge our squat and hinge our deadlift because then we're not utilizing our legs how we want to utilize them, right? So these are the people that probably, when they squat like a power lifter, they're not going to feel their quads a ton. I mean, it's just, you're using, like, the back is going to be the limiting factor in like a low bar back squat, right? So the goal with that is to be able to squat, heels down, try to go down in a vertical position, and try to go ass to grass. I can't quite make it, but at least I can get below parallel right there, right? So what we're doing for is, a lot of times you'll see this right there, or you'll have the people that are like this, or they'll go, boom, their knees will go way out like this, trying to create some type of room and depth for them, right? Now, this is, like I said, testing for expansion. Can we counter-nutate the sacrum? So people with narrow ISAs are going to be really good at this. They're probably just going to drop straight down. Now, they can't lift a lot of weight, but they're going to have a great squat pattern like that, right? Now, if you break down the squat, 0 to 60 degrees is going to be more externally rotated, counter-nutated position, right? And then that 60 to 120 is going to be more of an internally rotated, nutated position, right? Now, this is what causes the sticking point, right? Because if we're stuck this way, so far into nutation with the sacrum, so it's tilted forward, what happens is we go down and then, boom, the butt goes back because it's trying to create space and find that depth, right? So it's trying to create expansion. And then that last little bit is going to be your external rotation and counter-nutation position, right? And so as we go and pick our squats, I'll show you what the best positions are, right? So which squat should you use? So as a general rule, anything bilateral, symmetrical, either in the feet or the hands, is going to cause more compression, right? So that's going to increase compression and thus performance or force output, right? And then anything unilateral, asymmetrical is going to bias more rotation and more mobility, right? So this is what you look at if somebody's super stiff, can't rotate, their sport requires them to rotate. We're going to lean more towards, at least me, I'm going to lean more towards unilateral, asymmetrical, split squat, staggered stance type activities, things like that. That's going to give them the ability to play their sport. Now, if I have a power lifter, I'm going to low bar back squat, hinge the hell out of it all day long, right? Because they got to be good at squatting a whole lot of weight, bench pressing, deadlifting, right? Only time I'm going to give them anything like a asymmetrical type activity is going to be if they're starting to have pain, right? If they start having pain in anything, let's give them just a few little things like that to kind of draw them off that performance spectrum. Give them a little bit more motion, they start feeling a little better, then they can just get after it again, right? And that's the only time I would give somebody like that, anything, right? Now, if you need posterior compression or posterior expansion, then you're going to think about moving the implement to the front, right? We're going to elevate the heels. We're going to use the bands around the knees, but not to push hard, just to keep the band from pulling you in. It's just going to bias a little more of what they're lacking, which is plantar flexion, abduction, external rotation with the wide ISA, right? We're also going to bias the depth. So if you do like a quarter squat or a full squat, all the way down, that's going to be good for expansion and creating a little bit more mobility through, right? And I'll show you the difference with just using the heel raises, what that's going to do. And now, if you need more posterior compression, if you have a narrow ISA, back squats are going to be great. Anything like that, more deadlift type stuff. Use a little ball between the knees. Box squats are fantastic because that's going to get that right around that 90-degree mark where they're going to try to gain a little bit more of that motion and be able to push back out of it, right? Now I love these. Now a lot of people say lifting the heels is cheating, right? Or that all you have to do is stretch the ankle out. Well, I'm going to beg to differ on that one. I don't think that ankles are ever really stiff unless you just have some type of structural injury. What I think is going on is our calf muscles basically can't turn off because we keep getting pushed. A lot of people you'll see with tight calf muscles are generally those with a wide ISA. That sacrum is nutated forward, so when that gets pushed forward, what happens? Well, our body gets pushed forward. Well, what do? Oh, we're going to lean back because we don't want to fall over. That's our whole goal, is really not fall over and die. So it's just here and there. Well, if we're all pushed forward on our toes, well, what happens? Our calves get super tight and they're always on. And then when we try to squat, but then you get here and you just get a little stack position, pull the belt buckle up. Right there. You can get a nice vertical squat up and down all day long. Now, what you're going to try to do is as you get more expansion with this, you can lower the elevation of the heel raise, right? You can move more into a split squat position and just gradually get them with the main end goal, either squatting with the heels elevated or squatting foot flat. But it's whatever your end goal is and what KPIs you're looking for, right? And so you can still do ankle stretches and do all this stuff all you want, but I've seen people do a few rounds of these and then you get them off of it and then they can squat pretty much past parallel with a little work, right? Now it doesn't stick, you have to kind of stick with it a few little times, but just making a few little changes in the implement is going to really help out. Now to see if we can get air into the front of the chest, right? Because there's a lot of times you're going to see people that are lacking internal rotation and extension, right? Now, what we're looking for with the extension is super easy. Arms by the side, see if they can get back to around 60 degrees, give or take, without falling forward or doing anything like this, right? Any big compensations, or can they go back and not have their arms way out here like this, right? And that's all it is can we get air into the front of the chest? So the funny thing is this, you'll lose internal rotation with this if they can't get air into the front of the chest and extension, because what happens? If we're compressed here, it's going to pull it down, right? So if we can't expand, pulls everything down, pulls the scapula around like this, and then when we lift our arm up, that's the position we're in. Now, how do we get out of this, right? So how do we actually use our arm past this point? Whoop! We externally rotate it. Now the problem with that is when we externally rotate it, we got some muscles back in here, and they have to shorten or become concentric and tight. Well, that's generally going to be our infraspinatus, our teres minor, a lot of our rotator cuff muscles, right? And so that's, to me, why I think a lot of pitchers don't have a lot of that motion. They have the gird. A lot of people talk about it being the joint capsule or stuff like that. And it may be a little bit of that. Don't get me wrong, they're definitely going to use it. There's going to be some structural changes like humeral retroversion or the bone changes. But just like I changed motion with her, just by changing the shape of the thorax, I've seen it just go all the way down with a lot of guys, right? So if you can get this to relax and kind of turn off, you know, or not turn up as high, right? Because we can't ever turn muscles off. We can just decrease their activation to it, right? That's a super easy way to get your motion back. Now, how do you get that back? Well, narrows are going to do really well right around this 90-degree mark, and then wides are going to do better up top. Well, reason for that is really how it starts off. If you're a narrow, you kind of drop back a little bit, right? You drop back in here, and what's going on? Well, you're falling back, so how do you fall forward? You go here, right? So you just kind of draw everything forward, and that's just keeping us from falling backwards. That's our primary compensation right through there. Now, generally, if you can correct their ISA, then you can kind of help that out and be pretty good with that, right? Now, wide, on the other hand, is they're pushed forward. So what happens? They pull back here to not fall over. Well, sometimes they pull back too much, and so we got to tighten up here, and we're just really squished and compressed. That's a secondary compensation, right? So you always want to get rid of the first. So you always want to get a dynamic ISA as much as you can, right? Get that stacked position, and then you can work on the rest past that point, right? The reason I say 90 versus 110 or 120 is the serratus, right? So if we're in this position right here versus this position is going to get a little more serratus. Well, if you're narrow, you're already squished a ton, and the last thing you want to do is have the serratus pull the scapula around and squish you even further, right? So the wides, we want them to squish side to side like crazy. So if you bring them up to about 120 and reach up or do anything like that, that is going to be really good for compressing that side and opening up that front side, right? So things like, for a narrow, it's going to be like a quadruped, like a high bear plank, crawl variations, some punches back and forth. Those are going to be really good. And then for a wide, things like arm bars or say a pullover, nice and easy right through there, working on expanding, putting all of this in more of an eccentric position. That's going to work really well for those. I actually like the ab roller for that. A little ab roller with a pause out here at about 120. That works really good for getting there. And then, of course, you want adduction and external rotation, so things like face pulls, rows, even some of the P&F patterns where you kind of get in the band and you kind of doing up and down right there. Those work pretty well, too. And then, last but not least, because I know everybody's tired of hearing me talk, shoulder flexion, okay? Now, shoulder flexion is a little tricky because it depends on how you measure it, right? Now, you can do a simple self-test where you put your head, both shoulder blades, and both pelvis against the wall, okay? Let's see if we can still see me right here, sort of, right? All right, so say if I was doing this arm. Try to stay back and keep everything against the wall. Have your palm facing up and a slight bend in your elbow. What we're going to try to do is keep that stacked position and be able to go up as far as you can until either you start coming away from the wall or your elbow starts to come out a little bit, right? And that's your compensations. You can measure it on the table as well by just getting them to lay flat, get them there. I usually hold their arm here or just get them to do it themselves. Make sure that elbow point's straight up and you just go back as far as you can until, say, I'm about right there. So I can go further, but I start shifting out, right? So a lot of times you'll measure it and you go, oh, boom, I got great shoulder flexion. It's fantastic. The only problem is I'm way out here. It's not really testing shoulder flexion itself, right? Now, the cool thing about this is that you can use that test to see where you need to gain motion. So if they're lacking shoulder flexion, so if they can't get to 90 degrees, right? So they can't get to shoulder level, they start shifting out way up here, or they start arching up, which you'll see a lot is here. Then generally they're limited at the level below the scapula, right? So that's generally like T8 and below. And they'll generally want to get rid of a lot of anterior orientation of the pelvis. So if you can get that posteriorly oriented and expanded back through here, then that'll open them up a little bit more, right? Now, if they get to about shoulder level, then they're generally limited at the level of the scapula, right? So that's generally like T4 to T8, okay? That mid-scapular region, right? So that's where we want to kind of expand through there. A lot of times that's also going to be some anterior expansion that we'll need as well. And then if they get up to past that point above the level of the shoulder, that's going to be this upper thoracic, like T2 to T4 region, right? You'll also notice with them, they'll lack a lot of same side cervical rotation, and that's where you know you'll get a little bit higher, right? But that's what makes it super easy and fun, is that you can guide everything that you're doing in the gym around just these simple assessments like that. And then you can do a recheck and retest and everything like that, right? So it's just a lot of fun. So things that I like to do below the level of the shoulder, Zerchers are awesome, suitcase carries, some chops, a lot of retro sled drag. Don't go too heavy. The heavier you go, the more compression you're gonna have. So of course, if we want expansion, we don't wanna go too heavy. Things like cross connects are gonna be really good, like a lot of your ab exercises where you're coming around or you're reaching under like that. That's gonna get that lower section. The mid section is gonna be like arm bars, reaches, lat stretch coming out, full motion bent over rows. And then if you're lacking right at the top, you can do like a rock back lat stretch, which is awesome. I'll see if I can make a YouTube for that one. I need to anyway. Landmine presses. So the only problem with a landmine press is we don't want to come here and then turn. Anytime we turn, now we're creating compression on that side. So we want to get that, I like a short seated landmine press where we're getting seated. We get that little bit of posterior orientation through here, right there. So we still get the scapula to come around like this, but we're not turning. So we're not twisting and turning like that. And that'll open up that top section really well. And you can make the arms really tired too, which is awesome. But really when it all boils down to it, training is just testing, right? So your training is going to show you if you're pointing in the right direction. Are we hitting what we want to hit? Are we having pain with stuff, or are we just killing it and we're going up in weight and we feel great, right? So you're just going to really progress it or regress it according to that. So say they have an ugly back squat. Well, what are you going to usually do? All right, well, let's try a front squat. Well, front squat looks like shit. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to do a goblet squat, right? Well, if they can't goblet squat, let's do a split squat, right? Well, hell, they can't do that. Maybe they're just not coordinated, who knows? Let's get them on the table or get them on the floor. Let's just do some floor stuff, right? You just regress it, progress it, and then if they get better, you just move them back up. And it's just simple as that, right? You can unbalance the load, you can change the position of the load, front or back, you can alter the exercise, you could give a different cue. I don't like cues. I like to talk, well, not right now, but usually I like to talk the least amount as possible because I don't like for people to think. I like for them to just do. You just put them in a position, you get constraints. If you can put them in the right position, they'll give you the right output. All exercise is just like a computer. Exercise are inputs. We expect a certain output for every exercise, right? So it's just input and outputs, and that's how we guide how we go. And if you look at program design, so for me, every session, I like to design out a certain way. And number one being, you want to optimize movement, right? So we want to try to get a dynamic infrasternal angle. A lot of times, if you can lay hands on people, a lot of manual interventions work well. We're going to get all the joint mobilizations and mobility that we want for the day. Then we're going to pattern those newly gained motions, right? Kind of rewire that, prep the tissues. Then we want to move fast and explosive, right? So we want to get sympathetic, right? We want to drive that sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight. If you think about a whole program during the one session, it should look like this. Where the peak, we're apex, we're getting sympathetic, and then we're going to come back down, right? So after we move fast, we get explosive, we're going to do our main lift or our skill development, right? So a lot of times people can just get, if they're, say, a sprinter, there's only so much strength that's going to do them good. So your main lift for the day may just be doing sprints, right? So always think about that as going to be your, the activity that is going to make you strain the most, right? And then we're going to get fit with that movement, right? So really a lot of our accessory exercises are coming to play, our conditioning and so forth. And then spend about 5 minutes at the end just recovering and getting parasympathetic, right? So we don't want anybody to get all ramped up and hyped up and we're just lifting a bunch of heavy ass weight. All right, see you later, go get in your truck or you get in your car and get super tight and drive home. And then they like, oh, my back hurts. Why is my hip so stiff? I hate Hunter, he's the worst. So just get them to calm down and like just get the whole system to kind of like drop all the way back down, right? And then really all you want to look at is with this is just enjoy the simplicity of all this, right? So what's next? You could research this to, for years and still not get all the answers, but try to simplify what we do in the gym or in the clinic or anything like that as much as you can. Because like I said, the body is super complex, but it's not complicated by any means. I think we want to make it complicated because we want to feel important. I do. I want to feel important. But we're not really important. Who we're working with is important. And let their body figure it out and keep it as simple as possible so that when they figure it out, they get the win, right? And that's what we want out of this whole thing. Cool? All right, questions?